It is an honor and a privilege to present to this House the 2020 medium-term budget policy statement of the 6th administration. South Africa accounts for more than 700,000 of these cases. But most importantly, our country has the highest number of recoveries from this disease. Sadly, we have lost more than 20,000 people to this virus. Our heartfelt condolences goes to the loved ones of those departed fellow countrymen and women. In this regard, I call on all the people of Gauteng to support the 5 days of mourning from the 25th to the 29th of November, as announced by President Cyril Ramaphosa, to remember all those that we lost due to COVID-19 and gender-based violence, the other societal challenge which is facing our country. During that mourning period, let us all wear a black armband to show our respect to all those who have departed. Honorable members, the National Department of Health says, although our infection rate has stabilized over the past 2 months, the country is still experiencing pockets of cluster outbreaks. And this shows that COVID-19 will remain with us for the near future. As government, we call on our people to continue to follow public health protocols that are required to fight the spread of the COVID-19. Let us all continue to wash our hands for at least 20 seconds with soap or use alcohol-based sanitizer, properly wear our mask and maintain social and physical distance to protect ourselves and those around us. We welcome the progress that is being made in South Africa and internationally to develop a vaccine to fight this virus. Our hope is that when the vaccine is finally found, it will be fairly and equitably distributed around the world to save the lives. Honorable members, the following devastating effect of the COVID-19 pandemic, a black swan event in the history of the world. The province tabled a special adjustment budget on the 23rd of July 2020 to provide the funding required to address the impact of the pandemic and to align the budget to the envisaged consequences of the lockdown regulation. For the 2020 medium-term expenditure framework, which is MTF, this is done within severe constrained fiscals. Our economy is expected to contract by 7.8% this year. There have been severe job losses, which increased our unemployment rate. And as a province, we also had to revise our projected revenue targets of the 2019-2024 medium-term strategic framework. The national government is leading the path to rebuilding our economy through the Economic Reconstruction and Development Plan. The enormity of this work that must be done was clearly explained by President Ramaphosa when he presented the Economic Reconstruction and Development Plan to Parliament last month, and I quote, "Even the darkest of cloud has a silver lining. We need to see this moment as a rupture with the past and an opportunity to drive fundamental and lasting change. It is an opportunity not only to recover the ground that we have lost over the course of the pandemic, but to replace the economy on a new path to growth," close quote. Yesterday, President Ramaphosa led the 3rd South Africa Investment Conference as part of his drive to attract 1.2 trillion in investment to our country in the next 5 years. This presidential initiative has inspired great investment momentum with over 650 billion in investment commitments made during the first 2 conferences. From these commitments, projects valued to 872 billion were already under implementation and creating jobs for our people. At this year's conference, local and international investors made additional investment commitments that further demonstrate that even during these difficult times, our country continues to inspire confidence. As the Gauteng Provincial Government, we are convinced that the comprehensive interventions of the remodeled Growing Gauteng Together Vision 2030 are the key to rebuilding and growing our economy. Therefore, we are committed to continue to align funding to the 7 priorities of the 6th administration. Honorable members, the recent Exco Lekgotla agreed that in addition to these 7 GGT 2030 priorities, we must also track progress on the implementation on the following overarching key areas, namely our township economy revitalization by tracking government spend and supporting SMMEs and township entrepreneurs, the economic emancipation of women with plans to counter gender-based violence through upscaling of the Welfare to Work program, the implementation of youth empowerment programs through TEPO 1 million program, and driving a skills revolution using EPWP program to attract the youth, and clean governance by institutionalization of integrity, ethical leadership, and accountability in the public service. Gauteng as the economic hub of South Africa is key to achieving these objectives of President Ramaphosa's economic reconstruction and development plan. We believe that we are better placed to achieve this goal because GGT is aligned to the national plan and seek to address the triple challenges of poverty, inequality, unemployment, which have been worsened by COVID-19 through the following. We need to create the enabling conditions for infrastructure rollout, reindustrialize Gauteng for the 21st century through multi-tier SEZ and high growth sector program, bringing opportunity to many and confront inequality at the spatial level through township economy revitalization action plan, including strategic localization and production. Systematically confront youth economic incarceration through TEPO 1 million and youth workforce program with a focus on mass public employment to complement private sector opportunities. We need to restructure the Gauteng economy for long-term growth by modernizing industries, lowering barriers to entry and addressing distorted patterns of ownership, with a particular focus on women-owned and women-empowering enterprises, prioritizing labor-intensive growth, focused flexibly industrial policy, and engaging the private sector and social partners to join the effort through structured social compacting. Honorable members, through this mid-year adjustment budget, we are providing funding for these GGT 2030 priorities, taking into consideration the economic realities as well as the impact of the pandemic in our fiscals. The year 2020 has been a challenging one for the global economy, as the impact of COVID-19 pandemic has affected the growth prospects of most economies. The latest estimates from the International Monetary Fund suggest that the global economy will decline by 4.4%. The economic downturn in most economies reflect a significant fall in private consumption in most economies as a result of social distancing, and this will have a replicating effect on the overall aggregate demand, on trade, on investment, and on economic activity. The fall in aggregate demand has also affected business sentiments and weakened investment, which also affected the labor market as unemployment soared in most economies. The severe impact of COVID-19 has also resulted in the reversal of progress made towards fighting global poverty worldwide, as the economic impact of the pandemic has disproportionately adversely affected the low income levels, and especially in our low income households. However, the forecast of 2021 indicates that a robust recovery with global growth reaching 5.2%. This will primarily be driven by a return to normal economic activity, but also robust recovery in the international trade, especially in our country, which is South Africa. Our country's gross domestic product is expected to decrease by 7.8% this year. It must be remembered that pre-COVID-19, the economy was not in good shape, with poor microeconomic fundamentals. This has been worsened by the contagion from the global recession that has been caused by the pandemic and due to the domestic lockdown measures that were necessary to slow the local infection rates. However, the National Treasury estimates has a slight recovery in 2021 growth rate. The National Treasury estimates a slight recovery in 2021 rather, with growth rates expected to continue thereafter. These higher growth rates will only be possible if a more conducive environment is created for long-term investment with support for innovation, including towards a greener economy. The structural reform measures include opening the energy market, modernizing rails, rail and port infrastructure, reducing red tape and the cost of doing business, facilitating regional trade, and reduction the skills deficit with immigration and education reforms. Gauteng's economy is expected to contract by 8.4% in 2020. However, the gradual resumption of most economic activity that begin in the month of August, the estimates for 2021 suggest a marginal recovery. And in line with the South Africa as a whole, Gauteng province is expected to recover to a growth of 2.6% in 2021. The COVID-19 pandemic has permanently changed the economic landscape in the regional economy and nationwide. The recovery will likely be gradual over at least the 2 years. Centrally to the recovery, we will be in a process to restructure the nature of economic activity in a manner that will reduce future economic disruptions and this nature in the future. This process presents opportunity for future growth. Addressing the third Global Business Services and Digital Economy Sector Action Lab last month, our Premier David Makhura emphasized that the creation of a conducive environment is key to ensure that business activity increases jobs, and most jobs are created in the economy. I will open quote when he said, "On our part as government, we will continue to focus on cutting the red tape, invest in skills enabling infrastructure, unlock incentives as well as provide safe and secure environment," close quote. In response to the challenges brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic, GGT 2030 has been remodeled to speed up the reconstruction and recovery of the provincial economy. The remodeled GGT 2030 brings the possibility of an expansion of the tourism sector, growth in trade, catering and accommodation services sectors, growth in exports for agricultural sector, a rise in labor productivity and increased competitive of strategic sectors. As Gauteng, we are committed to use special economic zones to reindustrialize and modernize the Gauteng economy and thus improve infrastructure. SEZ-related construction projects commenced in August, and these investments have increased from 2.46 billion to 4.33 billion. The SEZ project in the Tshwane Automotive Special Economic Zone will boost the automotive industry infrastructure and will produce 200,000 cars a year by 2022. The building phase of this SEZ is the first stage of a 20 billion investment by the Ford Motor Company in the Tshwane Automotive Cluster, matched by 4 billion in public investment. Other SEZ projects will be initiated in the Val, aimed at revitalizing the manufacturing sector, logistics, agriculture, and agro-processing in a joint operation with the Gauteng Enterprise Propeller. The Department of Trade and Industry and Competition, which is DTIC now, the manufacturing sector, and the National Business Initiative will be part of those initiatives. These plans aim to focus on urgent issues.
In the 3-year infrastructure project management plans will only be achieved if they are credibly and signed off of 3-year infrastructure program implementation plan prepared by implementing agents. In the 2020-2021 financial year, a total budget of 11.6 billion was allocated for the Gauteng Provincial Government Infrastructure Program to maintain and improve the condition of the existing stock and to provide additional assets. This budget was adjusted upward by 617.4 million in the special budget to 12.2 billion. And Gauteng Provincial Government is focused on using infrastructure investment to reignite the economy as a result of budget of 12.3 billion, which is allocated to the infrastructure program, which represents an upward adjustment of 80.8 million. The main drivers of the upward adjustment include the approval of the rollover request of 165 million for the Department of Human Settlement and an upward adjustment of 99.6 million for the Department of Education to fund an improved infrastructure performance and resultant additional cash flow requirements for the remaining months of the financial year. The impact of the COVID-19 lockdown regulations and as well as the lack of readiness of projects to proceed from the planning and design to construction makes it very difficult to allocate a higher budget. Gauteng Provincial Treasury is specifically working with the departments to progress projects from the planning and design stages to construction. Overall infrastructure expenditure should ideally indicate a constant pattern throughout the financial year. Thus, 50% of annual expenditure should have been achieved by the end of October, of the end of the Q2 rather. However, the normal expected expenditure pattern cannot be applied in the current financial year due to the national lockdowns restrictions that negatively affected the performance of infrastructure projects. It is expected that the infrastructure spending will improve gradually since national lockdown restrictions have been eased to level 1. We are aware that the remaining months of the financial year will be characterized by the builders' holiday between December and January. Our hope is that the industry will shorten this holiday period to make up the time lost as a result of COVID-19. Provincial departments must follow the due diligence in ensuring that there is an alignment between the different planning documents. GPG does not want to see an increase in variations that could have been avoided if proper planning was undertaken and professional service providers applied due diligence in exercising their responsibilities. No infrastructure project should be allowed to proceed to construction before all the required approvals have been obtained from the relevant statutory authorities, such as municipalities. Over and above social and economic infrastructure, which is funded through the fiscals, the Gauteng provincial government is also looking into working with the private sector in order to deliver priority infrastructure projects at a scale that is essential to grow the economy. To accelerate infrastructure development and transform the South African economy, the role of the private sector will be essential in deploying public-private partnership models and purely private funding. Gauteng is already working with the Infrastructure South Africa Agency, that is at the presidency, and is planning to set up infrastructure investment to revive the provincial economy. This drive will eventually seek blacks, in particular women and young people, drawn in the thrust of economy of the province. The industrialization and export promotion refer to the development of specialized economic zones in the province. One example which I mentioned earlier is the construction of the Tshwane Automotive Special Economic Zone, as I've indicated. The Gauteng provincial government continues to improve the ease of doing business in each sector in compliance with applicable lockdown regulations towards the development of a skilled workforce for each industry and build enabling infrastructure, including SEZ and industrial parks. Honorable members, as Gauteng, we believe that it is fitting for us to reflect deeply on the lessons learned during this time of crisis that we face in the world. The value of crisis is not the trauma, pain and destruction that it has caused in our lives and in our economy, but a valuable lessons learned, both positive and negative. We saw humanity at its best when many people continuously placed their own lives in danger to save the lives of others. We honor these heroes and heroines of our response to the pandemic. But we also saw the worst behavior. We have seen corrupt activities resulting from the abuse and mismanagement of supply chain management processes during COVID-19. And this has eroded the trust between the people and the government. Honorable members, as a province, we have been outspoken and consistent in the fight against corruption, wastage, maladministration, and unethical conduct. That is why Premier David Makhura has continuously briefed the public about the actions that the province is taking against anyone implicated in the wrongdoing concerning the procurement of personal protective equipment and other services related to the fight against COVID-19. To promote transparency and adhere to the Premier's commitment to clean governance, Gauteng Provincial Treasury has embarked on an exercise of disclosing the provincial expenditure on PPE every month. This report includes DPT departments, entities, and municipalities. To date, the department has disclosed 3 reports from April to September 2020. And on the 30th of November, we were publishing the October 2020 report. We also continue to report the procurement of PPEs to National Treasury and to the people of Gauteng as required by the prescripts. Furthermore, we continue to conduct compliance checkouts throughout the departments and provide guidance where it is required. Honorable members, the Office of the Auditor General has finalized the audit processes for 2019-20 financial year, with exemption of few areas where the AGSA is performing quality control processes. As we present the MTBPS to this House today, we also bid a farewell to Auditor General Kimi Makwetu, who sadly passed away last week. I therefore take this opportunity to once again express our condolences to the Office of the Auditor General, his family, his friends and colleagues. He was a great public servant who was strongly committed to good governance and ethical conduct. One of his greatest legacies is undoubtedly the amendment of the Public Audit Act to give the Auditor General powers to act against officials for deliberately taking wrong decisions and waste the hard-earned taxes of the citizens. Honorable members, these tough economic times that we are experiencing will persist for the near future, and the next 3 years will be characterized by two things. It will be the gradual economic recovery from the unprecedented economic shock experienced during the COVID-19 pandemic, and then the gradual revival of the economy that will pick up as a result of the measures that are laying the foundation for a new growth path. This means that we will continue to experience revenue shortfalls across the spheres of government, increasing pressure on already stretched public finances. Therefore, the allocation of budget in the next 3 years will be guided by the following principles. The alignment to the priorities and interventions adopted to GTT 2030 are the first one. The second one will be the strategic projects that will stimulate economic growth in the Gauteng city region. And the third one will be the allocation that will consider the capacity of departments to absorb and effectively utilize the resources. As Gauteng provincial government, we believe that it is during these difficult times that many people depend on government for their healthcare needs, education, requirements, and social services. It is therefore our duty in these difficult times to balance between containing expenditure and growing the economy. We will also accelerate the implementation of the revenue enhancement strategy, eliminating leakages in their own revenue generation, and is very important, particularly in these times, in order to resource provincial priorities as a provincial equitable share and conditional grants from national, which are steadily on the decline. We must also manage accruals as they are a risk to the provincial budget. As we continue with the delicate balance of managing public finances, we must also work with all our partners to achieve the economic growth. This must be done through accelerating the implementation of the economic recovery plan, focusing on productive and growth sectors with an immediate aim of job creating much needed jobs for our people. Honorable members, let me now turn to the adjustment budget. In July, I adjusted the budget of this financial year to 146.4 billion. And today we are further adjusting the 2020-21 budget of the province to 143.7 billion. The most profound change to the 2020-21 baseline is seen in the reduction by 5 billion to the provincial equitable share, this being the clawing back of funds set aside for the improvements in conditions of service for the public servants. This is the result of the fiscal consolidation measures announced by the Minister of Finance in response to the weaker than expected growth, continued deterioration in public finances, and challenges to implement structural reforms. The extraordinary shock to economic output in 2020 has deepened the revenue shortfalls, which are expected to persist over the medium term, and which added to the worsening debt to GDP ratio, necessitate urgent action to avoid tipping off of the fiscal cliff. As the Gauteng provincial government, we will continue to work closely with the national and other relevant stakeholders to ensure service delivery is not affected. For conditional grants, there are cuts of 91.4 million in order to contribute towards the funding of the recapitalization of South African Airways. A total amount of 591.4 million will be rolled over from the 2019-20 to the 2020-21 financial years, of which 526 billion is conditional grant funding, and the balance of 65.4 million from the provincial equitable share. The details of these rollovers are as follows. Under the Department of Health, the department received a total rollover of 340.5 million. of which 290.6 million is for unpaid invoices and machinery and equipment at the end of the 2019-20 financial year, and 50.9 million for outstanding commitments in goods and services. Under education, a total of 52.4 million is rolled over to the 2020-2021 financial year to honor invoices that were received after the cut-off date from service providers. Under human settlement, the department will be receiving a total of 165 million in respect of unpaid invoices that could not be certified timely and processed for payment before the cut-off date, as well as delays in the proclamation, formalization and registration of township that lead to delays in the registration and transfer of title deeds. A further 7 million will be rolled over for the payment of property rates and taxes. Under community safety, a total of 5.3 million will be rolled over to the 2020-2021 financial year to honor invoices to chief fleet. In addition, the rollover of an amount of 5.3 million is reallocated to the department, being monies received for services rendered to other organs of state. Under the Department of Sports, Arts, Culture and Recreation, the department will be receiving 3.1 million to honor commitments and invoices from the 2019-20 financial year. Turning now to the additional allocations from national in the 2020-2021 main adjustment budget, GPG departments will be receiving a total of additional funding amounting to 1.3 billion under the auspices of the Presidential Employment Initiative. The resources are expected to flow through the provincial equitable share and conditional grants in the form of presidential employment emanating from the COVID-19 pandemic. These funds provide targeted employment opportunities as well as employment risk support and will be flowing to the following departments. Under education, it will be 1.1 billion for the hiring of education assistants and to preserve posts in quintile 4 and 5 in public schools and low-income private schools. Under health, it will be 47.4 million in additional funding to statutory human resource training and development grant to appoint enrolled and auxiliary nurses. Under social development, it will be 777.8 million towards increasing the early childhood development grant to provide salary top-ups for additional compliance support duties and for employment risk support. Under the Department of Transport, 45.5 million through the Provincial Road Maintenance Grant for job creation through the road maintenance. Additional funding of 104 million from national will be allocated to social development as a reimbursement for the provision of food relief to needy Gauteng residents during the early stages of COVID-19 pandemic, when there were stringent lockdown conditions that prevented many forms of economic activity. Human settlement will receive an additional 100 million to deal with the validated accruals. This while other processes are still ongoing to ascertain the true quantum of what the department owes and verification of these claims. Other additional funding of 51.1 million will be allocated to agriculture and rural development in order to provide support to Mfuleni local municipality, particularly relating to addressing the poor waste management services and fast-tracking service delivery. The Office of the Premier will be receiving an additional amount of 64.4 million, of which 49.6 million will go towards the validated claims for the acute mental health users and 14.7 million towards the 250 learners that were appointed to assist the hot community for a 12-month period during the COVID-19 pandemic. Gauteng provincial government departments will be receiving a total of 23 million, being funds suspended from the Gauteng provincial treasury baseline following the decentralization of the property audit processes as part of the phase 1 and 2 implementation process. And that is an integral part of the open tender process that the province embarked on in the 5th administration. This gives effect to the pronouncement made during the tabling of 2020-2021 budget in March, where I signaled that departments would gradually take over the process that had previously been centralized in the provincial treasury. The final phase will be implemented with effect from the 1st of April 2021. Health will also be receiving 324 million top-up sliced from the other Gauteng provincial government departments as a reimbursement for the personal protective equipment procured on their behalf during the early stages of the COVID-19 pandemic, when this function was centralized. Honorable members, let me conclude by acknowledging the following. I want to thank Premier Makura for your inspirational leadership as we continue to implement GTT 2030, a vision that will result in the delivery of the Gauteng of our dreams. To my colleagues in the Executive Council, thank you for your leadership, for your support and the teamwork, even during the robust discussions when tough decisions must be taken for the net benefit of the people of Gauteng. I want to thank you again, the Finance Portfolio Committee, which is led by Chairperson PC, and the Standing Committee on Public Accounts, led by Honorable Kanyile, and for giving us a great insight that have continuously improved the way we manage public finances. Majorities of the departments and MMCs of finance in the municipalities, and including your CFOs and MMs, many thanks for your support as we continue to execute our mandate of providing stewardship all financial matters in Gauteng. To my team in the Provincial Treasury led by HOD Nomantu Nkomo-Ralehoko, thank you as always for working closely with the departments, municipalities and entities to ensure that public finances in the province are managed in accordance with the rules and regulations. And thank you for your support that you have been giving to me since I've been working with you in the office, with all the DTTs that you work with, in ensuring that I deliver good services to the citizens of the province. Special thanks goes to my family, particularly my two children, for the support and inspiration that I receive from them every day as I continue to do my job as a public representative. Honorable members, these are difficult times, but we must not despair, as President Ramaphosa reminded us when he addressed the nation last week. He says, I will open quote, "Let us continue to demonstrate that we are people of resilience and courage. Let us show that we care for one another in sorrow, sickness, and in death. It is our individual actions over the next few weeks and months that will decide the fortunes of our nation." Close quote. As we go through COVID-19 pandemic, we need to learn that every crisis is never permanent. It has an expiry date. We read in history that there were challenges in the past and many people lost lives and livelihoods. There is life on the other side of any crisis, and we need to work together and observe all health protocols in order to avoid the second wave of this pandemic. That many experts have warned us that it might be more devastating than the first one. Honorable Speaker, let me present the 2020 MTBPS, which outlines the context within which we will fund provincial priorities aimed at realizing GTT 2030. I therefore table the following documents for consideration in the House. I table the 2020 medium-term budget policy statement, the Gauteng Provincial Adjustment Appropriation Bill 2020, the 2020 adjustment estimates of the provincial revenue and expenditure, the 2020 adjustment estimates of capital expenditure, a copy of my speech. I thank you. Madam Speaker will deliver it to your office. Thank you.